record. There we are. We're recording. All right, everyone. And again, welcome to this training session for 2023. We'll get started. So again, this training is all based on two very important books, the USA Pickleball Rulebook, and that it should say International Edition that we use in Canada, and of course the 2023 Pickleball Canada Referee Handbook, which are all online on the Pickleball Canada website. We got about 5 sections we're going to cover through the tonight, and the next session on the 22nd. Foundations and best practices is what we're looking at this evening, and common on-court situations, less common on-court situations that we run into. We'll talk a bit, and there wasn't too many rule changes for 2023, but I've highlighted about 9 of those that we'll get into. And working with line judges, albeit that is becoming a bit passé, not too many people have line judges anymore, but you still, for accreditation purposes, you still need to know how to work with them in case you run into that situation. So, foundation and best practices. How you, as soon as you go onto the court as a referee, especially when you're wearing credentials, the players and everybody else, spectators, are all looking at you, and you are representing Canada, you're representing your province, and you're representing the whole program. So you need to be professional. You need to act and be pleasant at all times to everybody who's out there. And even the players that, of course, you're refereeing, even if there's a problem, will hopefully teach you how to cool the situation and to lower the temperature and to be able to resolve the problems without getting into a bigger issue. You want to be respectful to all those around you. And again, one that we see quite often, avoid over-friendliness. That's a difficult one when you go on the court. It's a small community, the pickleball community, and people get to know you. But when you're on that court and you're working, you be pleasant, but don't be overly talkative and get into, you know, what were you doing last Saturday night conversations with them, because the team on the other side that may not know you is going to be saying, well, this isn't very good. Grace, they were partying last the other night, and you know, what chance do we have? So you want to avoid those situations. And of course, avoid emotional reactions to any play that is happening. It doesn't matter how good the play is in front of you. You as a referee or line judge, you never comment on any play that is happening in front of you. Avoid any anger and confrontation, but you have to deal with that as a referee. And as I say, we'll teach you, we'll talk about how to help avoiding those situations and aggravating the situation. Your main function, or one of your main functions, of course, is to enforce the rules in accordance with the best practices that are out there. We want to make sure that you're not overly authoritative, dictatorial, pushing your way. Again, one of the sayings that I hear that I like quite often is that the referee should be the facilitator of the match. You're out there, the players are the ones that are doing the battle. You need to help facilitate it so that it's equal in all parties, for both parties, and that the outcomes is even as possible for all involved. You want to devote full attention to the game before you. And I can't tell you how important that is. One of the biggest enemies of the referee is for mind lapses, to be inattentive and not watching what's happening and not paying attention to what's happening in front of you. Even if something happened, a shot or a rally before, and you're still thinking about that, whether or not you applied that correctly, you're now likely going to be missing what's happening in the rally right in front of you. So you need to forget that. You need to move on and pay focused attention to what is happening on that court immediately in front of you at that time. Again, I can't express how important that is and how easy it is to lose focus and to be sidetracked. And again, you will make mistakes as soon as that happens. Avoid leaning on walls and fences. That doesn't look professional. We don't want you chewing gum. We want you to be standing out there. You don't have to be standing to attention, but you need to be not moving around too much and being a disturbance to the teams. So just think of that when you're standing behind that net post. You're not going to use or carry any devices that could interfere with play, i.e. cell phones, right? It's interesting now, however, we need our cell phones on as referees because Pickleball Desk and a couple of other programs are providing information to you in ways of your next matches and other things. So you will have those on, have them on vibrate. And if you're fortunate enough to have an iPhone connected to it, of course, it's going to vibrate on the wrist. And I'll tell you right now, they actually have one of the certified referees made a program up that it allows you to have a pickleball timer for referee timer. And it is excellent because you can have it set for 15 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes for a medical timeout. And it will vibrate and give you the 1 minute warnings, 15-second warnings. And you don't even have to be watching it. It gives you the vibration and you can make the call. So it's an excellent tool and really does help me on the court for sure. So again,
sorry, Alan, is that on the app?
It is on the apps. Yep, it's on the website. And if you went,
so it's under Pickleball Desk.
It's referee, Pickleball Referee Timer. Excuse yourself from refereeing any family, close friends, double partners, etc. So we'll talk about that a little bit later when you go to the referee desk and you go to pick up the score sheet that they've called you for. And that's the first thing you're going to do is just check it, make sure again that none of those people are on that sheet. If they are, you're going to tell the referee coordinator and ask for another match, and they'll just make that change right there and give you the next match. So again, one of the nice little sayings, be what you would like your referee to be. So that's probably not somebody who's interfering with the play. As I mentioned before, the referee is a facilitator, and the match is about the players and the game, not about the referee, not about the refereeing that's happening out there. So try not to interject yourself too much, but you do need to make the calls that you need to make, and you need to be able to answer the questions that the players have to you, and do that as seamlessly and as quickly as possible. So your primary responsibilities as a referee, pretty obvious. You're going to keep and announce the correct score. Correct being an important word in there, and one that is easily mistaken. You know, the score is 2-1-1, and we often go 2-1-2, and we should be stopping play and saying, I'll re-announce the score and call that as 2-1-1. Track the correct server and recognize server and receiver positioning issues. Again, very high on your priority list. And a little bit of a hint here, again, for anybody that's going for assessments or eventually to be evaluated for certification. You will not pass your evaluation for certification if you miss a wrong server or a player out of position. I think you get 100 points, and that's an 11-point deduction. They made it so that if you miss one of those, it's an automatic fail. And when you're doing 3 matches, so what does that tell you? Each and every time before when you mark your score sheet and you look at your score sheet, you need to look up, know what you're going to see, where the bands are standing, what the score is, and whether or not they're in the right position and whether or not it's the right person in accordance with your peg that you have over your starting server or their partners' names. And again, of course, we will talk more and show you some evidence of that. Call service and non-volley zone foot faults immediately when they happen. So call service faults on the baseline. If their foot is on the line when the ball or the paddle hits the ball, you're going to make that call immediately. You know, volley zone, that is your full #1 area of responsibility. You own it. Nobody else does. You're going to make every call, and you better see everything that happens in that no volley zone. If you, as the referee, don't see something that's happening in there, you're not doing your job. That's as subtle as I can be in that one. So you don't want the players saying something happened in there and you're going, well, I don't know because I wasn't looking. If you didn't see it, then that's something different than it didn't happen. But again, that's your area of focus and your #1 priority, focusing on those no volley zone violations. And any movement towards the no volley zone is what you're going to be watching. You're not going to take your eyes off of that movement. You're going to be focused right on that until they get their movement under control. Maintain control and keep the match moving efficiently. Certainly an important function. Recognize violations, enforce the rules, and resolve disputes as they happen. And they do periodically. Those all come up. We all know that as rec players. We have those situations when we're just playing rec. So you can imagine in a tournament when people are playing for medals and they're And for their UTPRs or their CTPRs, they're going to be interested in making sure that the right things happen and get called correctly. Rule on line calls, but only when requested by a player. For those of you that have read the rules, this is always one of my favorite areas to interject now and ask you, there is one exception to that rule only on line calls when requested by a player. There is one time that you as a referee can make a line call without being appealed to. Does anybody know when that is? Come off of mute and let me know, because I can only see 4 people. Arlene, are you going to speak?
Short serve on the non-volley zone.
No. So
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I can. When can you as a referee make a line call without being appealed to by the players? There's one time and one time only. The rest of the time, it doesn't matter how well you see that ball. And if the player calls that ball out and you saw it definitely in, you say nothing until the team, one of the teams, requests your input. There is one exception to that, when you can make the line call immediately. So I'm not seeing anybody coming forward. Angela?
When you have 2 line judges with you and you're responsible for the line call on the sideline.
Well,
If you only have two line judges on your baselines, you're responsible for the sidelines.
Not quite, no.
If it's a
Not what
request
you were
from
thinking of?
the line judge.
Say again, sorry, who else is speaking there?
If it's a request from the line judge.
No, the line judges will not request, but it is, you guys are getting closer now. It is the situation when the line judge covers their eyes with their hands to say that they were unsighted and can no longer see that ball, and they make that gesture to you, you can immediately make a line call if you have seen that ball well enough to make that line call, right? If there is no line call by the line judge and you have not seen it well enough to make a line call, anybody know what happens then? It's a replay. And we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there, but that's always one of my favorite, just to test the knowledge of the people that are there. So you probably won't forget that one now, that when you as a referee are standing there, you never give any indication of what that ball might be in or out, and look at people to get them to appeal to you so that you can make a call. You never do that. You always mark point or carry on as if nothing has gone wrong. And then they come and ask you, ref, did you see that? Yes, I saw that. The ball was out. No, the ball was in. It's a definitive response that you're giving. You don't think, yes, I think I saw that ball in. That's not good enough. You never would say that. You're going to say that ball was in, that ball was out. And in the course, the case when the line judge hasn't made a call and he gives you that, you're able to immediately make that call and say, out, and call it a side out or second server or point. All right, let's carry on. Issue verbal warnings for profanity. Call technical warnings, technical fouls as appropriate. And we'll talk certainly more about how you do that and when you do that. Pre-tournament procedures. You want to, so before you go to a tournament is really what we're saying here. We want you to review each and every time the USA Pickleball rules, the international edition. Go in there, have another look at the rule book, thumb through it, make sure you're up on all of that. Same thing with the referee handbook. You go through it, make sure again that you refresh yourself on what the best practices might be, and recommend completing the online tests that are out there. And I certainly can't overemphasize that you can take those tests as many times as you want, and you should be doing that until you're scoring 100% each and every time. There's a bank of questions, and so you'll get different questions mixed with the other questions each and every time you do it. And again, they're situational and they're excellent. Tournament day preparation before a match. You want to prepare mentally and physically. I don't know how you prepare mentally. I guess start thinking about it. Physically, you want to do some stretching. You want to make sure that when you're standing there for long periods of time, that your back's going to be able to take it, your legs. Some people take mats to put their, so they can stand on, just to relieve the from the cement. So that's a good idea. You want to pick up all your tools in advance, and we'll go through the list of tools that you're going to have, and know where you are. Know the venue court layout. When they call your name, and you have to go to court 35. You want to know which direction you're heading in and the quickest way to get there, because of course, usually they have about 5 or 6 minutes, depending on what the head referee or the tournament director have set. And you want to head straight there, the most expeditious way there, and talk to the players, and then allow them the remaining time for warm up. So that's important to them. If you're not getting there in time, it's going to prolong things, and they're going to lose out their warm up time. Pre-match preparation, pick up a score sheet. You activate your timer. Again, immediately you do that for the 5 minutes, the 6 minutes, the 8 minutes, whatever it might be, is set by, the tournament director or the head referee. Review the score sheet. You're going to look for those players' names, any conflict of interest. You're going to certainly identify what court number you're going to go to. The match format, whether it's 1 to 15, best of 3 to 11, 1 to 21, whatever it might be. The triangle that's there, it says end change notation. That now is pretty much on all the score sheets that are now being printed out through pickleball tournaments or pickleball brackets. But you just want to make sure that that little triangle is on there for the end change. In matches 1 to 15, it's at 8. On the 2 out of 3 to 11, it's at 6. And games 1 to 21 is going to be at 11. If there's no triangle on your score sheet, put one in, for both teams. And what we do, it's not a best practice, but what we do is we do shade that in for the first team that gets there, so that we know that which team got there first, and that when the second team eventually gets there, we're not calling for another end change and going to switch ends again. Number 1 or a 2 is on the back of the score sheet, because that's how you're going to ask the players to identify which end they want to choose, or if they want to be the receiver or the server, or they want to defer. So you want to make sure that 1 or 2 is on there. Don't leave it just up to the desk to put on there and you get out there and find there's nothing there. It's a little embarrassing. And proceed to your court without delay. So the quickest way you can get there is the best way. Enter and exit the court with the players. If you're at a venue or a facility where you have to go through another court to get to the court that your players are going to be at, wait at the gate, make sure all the 4 players are there. And when there's a break in play, you ask the referee for permission to go through, and you usher your people through there as quickly as you can. And the same thing coming back, you want to make sure you do that. When you get on your court, you want to identify any safety hazards, any obstacles that might be on the court, overhangs, bumps in the court, somewhere tripping hazards, anything like that. If you have a portable net system, you are going to check its positioning. You're going to check its height. You're going to make sure that it's in the right position and everything is set correctly. And if you have the permanent net facilities, you're going to check the net height in the middle. Again, what is the net height in the middle?
34.
Thank you.
Inches.
34 inches. And then at the sides, where the sidelines are?
36.
36. There we have it. Thank you. So when you get to the court, you have picked up some of your supplies. You're going to have at least 2 starting server armbands that are that tournament's starting armbands. Not just any armband will do. It's got to be the ID that tournament is using. That's it, the right color, the right band, the right everything. You want to have at least 2 official balls for the match with you. So the players can warm up, and then you can put one in your pocket and have it available should anything happen to a second ball. I would suggest having probably 3 balls at least, but that's up to you. Make sure the balls are in good condition before you take them out there. And I don't always take brand new balls with me. You take up a scuffed ball, take a brand new ball, and whatever other condition, because a lot of players don't like playing with brand new balls. They prefer to have a scuffed ball. So just think of that when you're picking them up. And here's a good one too. It's where are you going to stand on that court when you get there? You've got a couple of things to consider. You're going to consider the sun, the shadows based on how low the sun is in the horizon. You're going to any distractions. You're going to be worrying about where the spectators are standing as opposed to you, and line judges and other referees. That doesn't show on here. and that should be on there. That's another consideration, is where your adjacent referee is on the court. Now, out of all of those, who wants to tell me what probably the most important one is that's going to be the biggest guiding factor?
Son?
That's an important one. Just going to let somebody else in here.
Distractions.
Distractions, and how would that be a consideration to you? What are you thinking of when you're saying that?
Well, I'm thinking of another referee standing right behind me,
Right?
speaking. The spectators could be distractions.
Right. There's no real good one answer here. I sort of led you in that one and saying what's the most important one. They're really all important, and they have to be all taken into consideration before you go. But I tell you, there was a situation I had one time at Nationals where they sent me on a court with line judges to do a bronze medal match, and there was no way we could physically get line judges on the court or at the side of the courts. We had to go and ask for another court. So there's a number one priority there. And if the line judges could only be at one side of the court and end of the court, then that would be your main focus. And then you would be standing on the opposite side from them. So that would set it right there. There's just no other way around. I don't care where the other referee is standing. I don't care where the sun is, unless you absolutely can't see, then it would be a situation where we can't use that court again. So there would be a situation where that would be a determining factor. The other one I'll share with you is spectators. I've put that higher on my priority list lately. I guess one of the facilities that I work at here down at Legacy, they have 41 courts, and they have 3 courts that are all together. So you have 2 end courts and 1 in the middle. And of course, the people that are at the end courts have got spectators. And so what you don't want to have a situation is where you have your back to the spectators, because when the spectators are doing this to the players to take timeouts or saying get up there quicker and doing things, they're coaching, aren't they? And they may not be verbally saying that, but they're giving signals, they're coaching, and you want to be able to identify that. So that became a higher priority based on those courts and where I'm going to stand. And I care less about standing back to back with another referee. That's unfortunate, and we have to just live with that. So those are all things that I want you just to think about. There's no right answer. There just has to be a thought process that goes in there, and sort of an order of priority. Pre-match briefing. Now, this is something that, as all new referees, you want to be able to get down. I remember when I was going to be evaluated, I laid in bed at night running through my pre-match briefings, I don't know how many times, and got that down and streamlined as quickly as I could, because the players don't want to listen to you. You have an obligation to tell them, and they have an obligation to listen, but they're not really listening. So you want to work through this pretty darn quickly. So what you do is you introduce yourself, you identify who they are based on the score sheet. And let me tell you, this is an important time in the match before it's even started. Very important that you identify who the people are, who the 2 teams are, and who their starting server is. Their partner, the starting server's partner, I'm not too interested in, but I'm going to identify that starting server. I'm going to give them an identification bracelet, band. I'm going to circle their name on the score sheet, and I am going to identify them with some other mark, whether that's the white hat they're wearing, the orange shirt, the pink pants, whatever it might be. I'm going to make a note of that just under their name, so I have that readily available over and above them just wearing the band. So that's an important, you hear what I'm saying? It's an important time frame, and that's an important thing to do. You want to check their paddles, and when you're doing a paddle check, what are we looking for? You're looking, first of all, to make sure that it's a USAPA approved paddle. Now, most of the new paddles all have a USAPA approved sticker on them, but just because a paddle doesn't have a USAPA approved sticker on it does not mean that it's not approved. So that means that you should have on your cell phone the USAPA approved paddle list. And if you have a paddle that you're not sure of, You put in the brand, you put in the model name, and it will come up and let you know whether that paddle is approved or not approved. You also should be asking the players right off the bat, have you all checked that all your paddles are approved, or on the approved paddle list? And they should be identifying, yes, they are. And you can go from there, but it's still up to you then to check that paddle. And when we're checking the paddle, we're wanting to make sure that the paddle surface has got nothing on it. It's not sticky. So when you're doing the rub on the paddle, we're going to use two hands and we're going to actually exert some pressure. I've seen people using their fingertips and doing this. And I'll tell you, you can't tell whether that paddle is very sticky or not. And I found a couple that are so sticky that we've told them to take them away and wash it off. And in one case, it didn't wash off and they had to use another paddle. You get delamination of surfaces. You get a pitting of the surfaces. You're checking the roughness of the surface. And you have to just gauge that through experience. Head has got there was actually a number of paddles that are out there right now that have quite rough surfaces. But if they're USAP approved, they actually have gone through the roughness test, where they have a tool that they go over the top of it. It measures the peaks and valleys on the paddle, and it has to be within so many units of measure. And if they're obviously they have the approval, they're approved. So you can start gauging what the roughness level is. And if one paddle exceeds that, then you have to be suspicious. Has somebody doctored that paddle up? Have they taken sandpaper to it? Have they done something to it other that they shouldn't have? And that means then calling in somebody more experienced, like the head referee, to check that paddle out. I know, again, if they're delaminating, they're coming apart on at the top or the bottom, you need to have them change that paddle out. The other thing you're looking for, any stickers or anything that they put on the paddle that is more than an inch above from the base of the handle. You're allowed to put a sticker an inch up from the handle on either side, but not extending beyond that inch, and half an inch all the way around the edge guard. They can put a sticker on there with their name on it or whatever they might have. If somebody has, I had one paddle that was taken and somebody did some beautiful artwork, did a little artist lace work all the way around it, but it was raised because it was an oil paint and it had little flowers and everything on it, and that was illegal. New paddle, please. If they have used a felt pen, and I had one the other day, Ben Johns' signature on there, whoever, and that was done by felt pen, no problem. Right across the face of the surface, right in the middle of the hitting area, there's not a problem with that at all, because it's not raised. It's not going to do anything to the ball when it hits it. So those are the sort of things that you're looking for when you're just doing a paddle check. And it's important that you do a thorough check. One other identification, or one other thing I'll mention with that, is that there is a paddle out there called Carbon, CBRN. That's the manufacturer's name, CBRN. You need to make a note of this. They had a problem a few years ago and introduced a paddle that got USA approved and got the sticker on it, and it was disseminated. Later, they did another check on it and found that that paddle did not conform to standards. And they were out there, and so they asked anybody to send theirs in, and they would give them a new one. Not everybody did, so there's some that were still out there. What they had to do for the next round was to put on a batch number or serial number, and that batch number and serial number is right on the edge, just up from the handle, and it is only on one side. So you need to check CBRNs to make sure that they have a serial number, and that is an approved paddle. The other CBRNs that just have a USAPA logo on it with no batch number or serial number are not approved. What happens if somebody plays a point with a paddle and then you ask to look at it and you discover that it's not approved? What happens?
They lose the match.
Very good. That's a match forfeit. Excellent. Thanks, Tony. Do you want to review line calling responsibilities with the players? My line is, I own the no volley zone, you own all the other lines. You're going to call them loudly, clearly, timely each time they go out, please, regardless how obviously they go out. And in line, any line calling disputes, defer to me, not the opposition. That covers that. And then we're going to ask a player for a 1 or a 2. We'll look at one of the 4 players and you say, can you give me a 1 or a 2, please? And they say 2. You then take your clipboard and your score sheet. You lift the score sheet up that has the 1 written on the back of it, and you display that to all 4 players. You want to be transparent, out and open, and make sure all the players can see that number. You don't just go 1 or a 2, please, and go 2. Yeah, that's a 2, because nobody has seen it other than you, and you're saying it's a 2, and you could be favoring a team, or it could be seen to be that way. So again, you want to be very transparent, open, and let them all see that number. You display that. You then would ask them, yes, it was a 2, you're correct. You'll have the choice to determine your end. You have the choice of serving, receiving, or deferring that choice. And say they take serve, then you ask the other team what end they would like to take over. If a team first defers the choice, then you go to the other team and you ask them. They have the choice again of end, to serve or to receive. What's your choice? And if they take serve, then the other team is going to obviously then have to take the end choice and make it where they're going to stand on the court. You want to identify each team starting server. As I've already said, you put the any identifier down there, blonde hair, white hat, again, whatever it might be. Begin continuing the warm-up with the remaining time left. So you want to do it again this quickly so that the players have the 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes to warm up. Regardless of the amount of time you've given them, or not regardless, if you have less than a minute, you want to tell them that they've got 45 seconds. Then you would call 15 seconds remaining. But normally, if they have 2 minutes, for example, remaining, you say you've got 2 minutes, you will always give a 1 minute remaining. So if you say you forget that your timer has gone on and it's down to 50 seconds, you don't turn around and say 50 seconds. You now have obligated, you've got to give them a 1 minute warning. So you would say you have 1 minute, and then after 45 seconds, there's 15 seconds remaining. You go 15 seconds, balls in, please. Players take the position and get them into position so that we are going to start right on time. And again, it says here, tailor your briefing to circumstances and the player's experience. So the circumstances are, as we go through the day, and the players have had this from morning to night, you can start cutting down on your briefing a little bit and make it a little bit more expeditious and get it out there. And yeah, if you have 2.5 and 3.0 players that haven't played in tournaments before, you're probably going to have to take a little bit more time with them and talk about line calling responsibilities and so forth. So again, circumstances are important, and try to cover that. Mark the serving team for each game. So again, on the side, we'll show you in a minute here, we'll have a score sheet come up. But what you do if it's a best of 3 to 11, you are going to have a team that says they're going to serve first. So you put that down on the left-hand side of the score sheet on the scores where the lines are go from 0 to 15. And you would put down, or 17, whatever it goes up to, and you would put an X there. And by default, you would put an X at the game number 3. If there is a game number 3, they would be serving first. So again, by default, the other team, the opposition, would be serving the middle game. So on the middle line of theirs, you would put an X. So you know all 3 teams that are going to be serving. First is the team A that took the serve first. They're going to serve first and third, and the other team is going to serve second. And that's how we do that. Record, identify the card. Yes, confirm and mark end change notification. If it's not there, as I said before, putting that triangle in. So here's your score sheet. This score sheet was renewed about probably about 4 years ago now, and they made some good changes to it. And the arrows are indicating a few things. We're talking about first server there. So here, this arrow on the left is where the server is, and the X goes in there. This team, chose to serve first, or the other team said they were going to receive. So this team is going to serve first. And when you put that in there, you can put it in there for the third game, because we know that it's going to alternate. So this other team is going to serve the second game of that match. The triangle is there in the third game to remind you as the referee that we do need to call an end change as soon as that first team gets there. The other things that you'll notice in this score sheet, the lines between all the scores have gone from solid to dotted. that makes it much easier when you're going to put a side out marking there, a vertical line, after 2 points have been scored by the Smiths here. You're going to put a solid line down there so that when we take the peg off and we turn it around and we put it over here to this other team, and then they've done their thing, when we turn it back to go to the Smiths, we're going to identify that there's a line here between 2 and 3. The number to the left of that is even. It's a 2. So that tells me who's going to start serving first for this team after that previous rally was a side out. So in this case, who's going to be serving first? Jim Smith or Mary Smith when the score is 2? Who wants to tell me that? Tony, you've come on.
Mary.
Mary. Why is it Mary? Because
She
Mary
was the
had been
first server.
No, Mary's not the first server.
He's the starting server.
Say again?
Or the starting server, sorry.
That's right. Very good. Terminology is important. She's the starting server for this team, and therefore she is going to be the first server for this rally and standing in the right-hand court, the even court. So that's an important concept that we all have to understand. As I say, I won't move on from here unless everybody understands that. This line, when it gets put down, and I'll actually should get to a sheet here with that line on it. Let's see how far away it is. It's far away, so we'll get to that. But for right now, we sort of have that principle. Right. Let's go into this one. This is just a game, score sheet for 1 to 21, showing you what that would be like. And in this case, we're playing best. It's not 1 to 21. Sorry, it's the first game to 15. It happens to go to 21, but we're playing to 15, and therefore the side out is at 8. And again, we've identified the team that's going to start serving. We've identified the starting server is back to Mary, and we put the clip, the starting server clip, at 2. Right? It has a 1 on the other side, and we're putting it at a 2 because the score is 0-0-2, identifying her as the second server, because when the game starts, the team only gets 1 serve, correct? Right. When we turn that around and we go to the other side here, and we have Brown that's going to serve, they would be serving at 0-0, and we would have this clip over her name as a 1. So it would be 0-0-1 if they didn't score a point, that is. Okay.
It's actually Ralph on the bottom there.
Ralph Brown, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Ralph. Yeah,
Yeah.
you said her, but it's hard to see because it's upside down.
I avoided her first name because I couldn't make it out. Thank you. Final pre-play procedure. Point the clipboard clip towards the serving team. Okay, we'll show you a picture of that in a minute. So you're taking the clipboard clip, not the starting server clip, but the clipboard clip, and you have the score sheet in the clipboard so that the team to your left are the names that are up at the top. They're going to be the team to your left. So this is, again, another very important concept, and one of the first things that any assessor is going to be looking at. Do you have the score sheet properly placed in the clipboard, and do you have it properly held pointing to the serving team? So your server clip was now going to be over the circled starting server's name with the number 2 facing you at the start of the match. So again, that it's the score is 0-0-2. You establish yourself in a position behind the net post about 3 to 4 feet. This will depend on how large the court is and how much room you have. And I would say 3 to 4 feet. 3 feet is pretty close. I would like to be probably 4 or 5 feet back, but you don't want to be too far back because you need to have your peripheral vision. You need to be able to have a good look at those no volley zone lines right in front of you on both sides of that net. So that's 14 feet that you're covering right in front of you. You want to confirm the team's names at the beginning of the match, and only at the beginning of the match. And what we don't do is we don't say we have Ralph Brown and Charlie, or Ralph Brown serving with Charlie serving 2, right? So what I'm saying is we don't identify who the server is. We would just say we have Charlie and Ralph Brown serving to Angela and Al whatever it might be. We don't again identify server receiver. We're just identifying, do we have the right players? And do I have the score sheet turned around correctly on my scorecard so that I know the players on the left are Angela and Al, and the players on my right are Ralph and Charlie. That's very important because we've had, again, players don't listen to referees very much. It happens quite often. And I just was actually had a trainee out on the court, and she asked that question, and none of the players responded. And she was going to carry on. And I said, stop. Get them to respond to you affirmatively or not, that that's their names. And so she did, because we've had situations where after the match is finished, they turn around and they go to Angela and Al and say, you won. Oh, no, that's not us. We're Ralph and Charlie over here. And that's happened. And so you have a little bit of a mess on your hands when you've done that. You have to use arrows, and it's not very pleasant to have to turn that back into the referee coordinator. So again, make sure that you have that absolutely understood. You know which team is on which side. You have the names properly, and that score sheet on the clipboard correctly placed. You want to visually verify the service bands and the player's positioning based on the band all the time. So that's why those bands need to be seen at all times by the opposition, by the spectators, and by you, the referee. So any sweaters and shirts or coats that are coming down over the top, you need to have that fixed. They are allowed to place them anywhere where it's visible. They can have it in their shoe. They could have it on their ear, anywhere that it's visible to you all the time. So that's entirely up to them where they put it. At time 0, when time is in, you are going to announce game 1, time in 002. So again, this is an important issue. USAPA is really coming down now hard on identifying what the scripts are for what the referees are to say. And if in their officiating handbook, they've got this all well done. So in this case, that script is right there at time -0. When time is in, you say game number 1, time in 002. And then they have 10 seconds to put that ball into play. So that's the script. This is just to give you a visual. You'll identify over here on the even courts that this player has got a little band here, a little red band, and this player over here has got a little red band. So we know at the start of this match, the server on the right-hand side here is serving, and the score is 002. That's all we're going to do, and they're going to go diagonal. When they hit the net and the ball comes over to them over here, we're identifying again that at 0, we have a starting server band, and it's 0-0, so it's still even. So we do have 2 bands serving to each other, and we're still okay, and we're still good. That's what you must do each and every time. Before you call the score, you want to identify, are the players, in accordance with their bands and in accordance with the scores, standing in the right court, in the right position. Now remember, when teams are stacking, a receiver partner can stand anywhere they want. So you can have 2 players that are standing side by side. And then the only thing you're interested in that case is which person hits the ball, and it's better be the person that is the correct person to hit the ball. And if it's 0-0, you know it's going to be somebody with the band on. That's why it's again handy to have an identifier on your score sheet that identifies that orange shirt, the purple hat, whatever it might be, so that we don't just rely on the band. You become very familiar with who that starting server is based on the clothing that they're wearing, and you get to know them. So here's the concept again, where we have the score sheet in front of us, and the clipboard clip is facing the serving team. So if I'm standing behind the net post here right now, we have this team that's to our left, as their names are here, and the teams that are to our right, when I turn that around, their names will be at the top with this clip facing them to the right. So that's the correct positioning for the clipboard and the scoreboard based on where the teams are standing. Okay, important concept. Prior to every serve, you want to confirm readiness of the players. So you're going to look at the receivers. You're going to make sure that they and their partner are in position. And I might as well mention right now, if that partner has gone off, for example, to get a ball off in the corner, I'm going to allow that receiver's partner to get fully back into position at the front of the net no volley zone and allow them to get back there, because they've done us the goodness of getting the ball and we're going to allow them to get in position. If, however, they didn't go get the ball, and if they are lollygagging, talking to their partner back at the baseline, I do not wait for them to get up to the no volley zone before I call the score. I will call the score when the receiver is in position and when the server is also in position, ready to serve the ball. So again, what the rule book says, that your responsibility as a referee is to call the score when the players are ready, or you identify they should be ready. And that's very important. That should be ready is based on you and how much time you're going to give them. And again, if they're talking, not moving smartly into position, you may call the score. Look at the server and their partner. Now what they want you to do is they want you to put your hand out, and they want you to look at, after we have identified that the server has got the ball, the receivers are in position, you are now going to look to your left. If that's where the receiver is standing, you're going to start calling the score, looking at the receiver. And if it's 4, you're going to say 4, looking at the receiver. You're then going to turn your head to the right to look at the server and complete calling the score. So you've gone 4, 3, 2, and then you lower your hand once you say 2 and allowing them to score. We're doing that because a server or a receiver can become unready up until the point in time when the referee starts to call the score. So if you're not looking at them and you're looking at the server and you call the score and they serve the ball, and you turn around and you look at the receiver and they have not returned it, and they have their paddle in the air or they have their back to the net, you missed a not ready signal and should have never called the score. So that's now why you'll see most referees looking at the receiver, they start to call the score there, and then they turn their head quickly and finish the score count on the other side. Now, when I identified this in training lately, I want you to understand that that's a priority to make sure that that team doesn't pull an unready call on you. But again, what is equally as important, and maybe even more important, is that you need to get your head to that right to check the server to identify that the release of the ball is being done properly. They are not putting any spin on the ball. They're putting no motion on a ball if it's going to be the drop serve. You have to get your head back there to identify that quickly and to be able to make that call. So if they're serving quicker than you can get your head over, you have to not identify. You have to move your head and probably start the call looking at the server until you make sure they are serving legally, is what I'm saying. So it's, again, you can't do everything, and you have to then take the priority, but change it up through the match. Based on the score in the server's band, you want to mentally confirm are the server and the potential receiver in the correct position before each and every call. So your script for starting the game or the match. Players are in position or should be in position after you have called 15 seconds. So game or match to 15, you're going to announce time in 002. In multi-game matches, in other words, games best of 3 to 11 or 21, you're going to say game number 1, time in 002. So you'll notice the sequence there is that you're going to identify game in, then you're going to call time in 002. So the last thing you do is you're going to call the score. The thing just prior to that is you're calling time in before you call the score. So there's nothing in between there. So this is, again, the new script. Very seamless, very simple, very brief, very concise, very to the point. Time in 002. Game number 1, time in 002. Prior to every serve, any players may ask, what is the correct score? Am I the correct server? Am I the correct receiver? Am I in the correct position? Am I good? And if you've not called the score, you want to answer those questions. So again, to answer those questions, what is the score? That's probably the receiver that's asked that, but not necessarily. But if it is the receiver, you say you have 4. And by doing that, you've identified that the person with the band should be serving in the right, or should be standing in the right-hand court. And that's probably all that they're after. If they say, no, ref, what's the complete score? You now then step forward, raise your hands, and say, the score is, you have 4, receivers have 2, second server. So I haven't said, have I, 4-2-2. I haven't called it like I would normally just call the score, because we don't want to be misconstrued that we're calling the score. So again, we step in, you have 4, they have 2, second server, step back into position, I will recall the score. And then you call 4-2-2, and they're allowed to hit the ball within the 10 seconds, get it into play. Am I the correct server? Yes, you are. No, you're not. Those are what you answer. Am I the correct receiver? Same answer. Yes, you are. No, you're not. Am I in the correct position? No, you're not. Yes, you are. Am I good? Now, this is new in the rule book. They can ask, am I good? They're now failing to understand. They're just saying to you, both of those questions are out there. So now you identify, no, you're not in the correct position. You are the correct server. So that means that they're going to change from the one side of the court to the other side, and they'll be in position. I will recall the score if you haven't called it, or call the score for the first time. So if you have called the score and the ball is not being served, again, you want to quickly step forward, raise your arms, and say, answer the question, and then announce you will recall the score and step back and lower the arms. That's just the routine. We want to make sure that you understand fully. So anytime that you're asked a question after the score has been called, raise your hands and just stop play. You don't have to say stop play. You don't have to say time. Just raise your hands and answer the question, and then step back into position and say, I will recall the score. If you have called the score and the ball has not been served, if the players have asked, am I good? We are good. You may now reply, yeah, I went through that with you already. Announce the score clearly, loudly, and with consistent cadence. This is important for the referee to get that down. It's something unique to every referee, how you're going to call the score. I, for the longest time, have been well known for my sort of a military way of doing it. 0-0-2, so that the action happens on the last one. And I've now changed it a little bit, because now I'm putting my arm out, 0-0-2, and still with that sort of motion. So we're calling it that quickly with that kind of cadence. If you ever find yourself that you've called it 0-0-2 and you go 0-0, and there's a pause while you're looking for your fingers, or you want to look at your clipboard and you can't remember if it's a 1 or a 2, and you go 0-0-1, and they've served the ball, is that a fault?
Yes,
Why is it a fault?
because you've already started the call. So if
Right.
you haven't started the call, it's not a fault. But once you've started the call, it's a fault.
Okay, but you missed, you're absolutely right in your concept and what you're saying, but you missed my little example there, because I paused. I went, instead of going 0-0-1, I went 0-0-1, which would cause them, because of my delay in not knowing whether it was a 1 or a 2, I missed my cadence, my normal cadence. And if they hit the ball, I would say, referee, correction, I'm going to recall that score, because I changed my cadence and I was a contributing factor to having that person lose their timing. Okay, so I just wanted to make that point. That's something, again, that you have to think of. Was that my problem and not their problem? And that's true. That was my problem, the way I called it. If I'm always called every other one 0-0-1, and now I go 0-0-1, that's a problem. Okay, so you've got to think about that. Easy thing, referee correction, I'll recall. Watch the server for faults. So this is, again, very important. When we have a server that's standing up into position, There's a number of things that you're going to be looking at and watching through very, very closely. You're going to be looking for foot faults on the baseline. Are they standing within the imaginary extensions of both the sideline and the center lines? Everybody understand what I'm saying by that? Anybody that wants me to amplify that? So you have to be 1 foot behind the baseline, and you have to have no feet extending beyond the extension of the sideline or the center line. So if there's a foot that's on touching the playing surface outside of that extension, when the ball, or again, the paddle hits the ball, it's going to be called a fault. If they raise that foot and it's now not in contact with the playing surface, it's still above and outside the line, that's not a fault because it's only one dimensional and it has to be touching the pavement. So you just want to make sure that they are within the boundaries that they're supposed to be. If not, it's fault, foot fault, outside the extension. Or outside the boundary.
Sorry, does the partner have to be outside the line as well?
Partner can stand anywhere on the court or the playing surface they want. There is no rule which governs where that partner stands. Illegal
Is there
serves.
2 rules?
Say again?
Is there 2 rules for sanctioned and unsanctioned or not?
We don't care about unsanctioned. We're only talking about rules for sanctioned tournament
Yeah.
play.
All right, because, yeah.
Illegal serves. We're watching for illegal serves, and there's a number of issues there which we'll get into. But right now, drop serves, when you if they're propelled and not just released, then that would be a problem. If now, based on the new rules this year, they're not allowed to spin, so they're not allowed to manipulate that ball. So what you have to be focusing on then is the rotation of the holes within the ball. If they're just throwing it up and there's a little tiny rotation, that's not a problem. If they're using their fingers to manipulate that ball and doing that, they're putting spin on it and it's rolling over a number of times. That now is an illegal serve, regardless of whether it's going to be a drop serve or a volley serve. That's illegal. So you would call that immediately. Okay. Visibly follow the ball to the receiving court, and you want to make sure that any short serves are immediately called. In other words, if they hit into the no volley zone or they hit the no volley zone line, you immediately call fault. Second server, side out. Serving timing. Serving the ball before the complete score has been called is a fault. Right? Just what Suzanne was saying earlier. And once you start to call, as soon as you start the first syllable of the first number, like T and 2, 2, 3, 1. So the first T and 2, as soon as you start to say that, up until you get the 1 out, complete 1 out, they can't hit the ball without being penalized anywhere in there. If they hit the ball prior to you saying 1, and you haven't started to call the score, there is now no fault. That ball is dead until the point in time when the referee starts to call the score. So if you haven't started to call the score and they hit the ball, just stop. We'll put the ball back, please. Please wait for me to call the score before you serve. And again, if they hit the ball before you get that 1 out or the 2 out in 2-1-2, then again, it's a fault. It's the same point in time that teams can call a timeout up until the point in time when the paddle then hits the ball. So a little bit different. So it's when the paddle hits the ball, they can call a timeout. So you have to have your ears open while you're looking at the serving team to make sure that the serve is legal. And at the same time, the receivers, who are likely the ones going to be calling a timeout, they call timeout prior to that paddle hitting the ball. What happens if the paddle hits the ball and then you hear timeout? What do?
Continue play.
Continue play, ignore the timeout. Anybody else?
I would agree with that.
No, that's incorrect. Yep, that's okay. It would be a fault.
Isn't it?
Okay, if that paddle has hit the ball and then the timeout comes after the fact, that's a delay of game, and that is a fault point for the serving team. If they ask for a timeout just prior to that paddle hitting the ball, then you just raise your hands quickly, go timeout called, 4, 3, 2, 1 minute. So again, those points in time, you'll see I'm making note of those for you. I'm calling those out. This is the point in time. Those are very, very important because that's what you have to watch and listen for each and every time. 10-second rule. So anytime that you call the score, the serving team has 10 seconds to put that ball into play. That's usually not a problem these days. I don't see anybody even getting close in matches I've been doing lately, where before it was an issue. And when we used to actually talk to them about it in the pre-match briefing, you have up to 10 seconds. And I would say to them, 1, 2, 3, 4, to give them an idea that 10 seconds is an awfully long period of time. Because when I call the score, I see players look at their partner, look at me, and whoosh, bang, the ball is hit. And that's all done within 2 seconds. And they don't need to rush, right? So they have quite an extended period of time. So, but you need to, in your head, you need to get that metronome going, and you need to know what 10 seconds looks like. And so watch your watch, practice that one, and get that 10-second countdown so that you can put that in your head and know it without actually doing the chopping to know what 10 seconds is. I usually, if I have somebody that's been delayed in their serving, I won't do anything until about 5 or 6 seconds go by. Then in my head, I start going 7, 8, 9, 10. Fault! Service violation, time period. Second server, side out. So any ball that is served may clear or touch the net now, you all know that, but must clear the no volley zone and those no volley zone lines. Serve ball touching the receiver or the receiver's partner before landing is a point for the serving team. Doesn't matter where the server's partner is standing or the server, if they're hit before the ball bounces, that's a point for the serving team. During play, you want to call every fault immediately, loudly, and confidently. What I always like to say at this point is that those players are watching you as the referee come out onto that court, and how you hold yourself and how you speak and how you identify and how you call the score is everything that's coming out of your mouth is being analyzed, and they're viewing what kind of referee, what kind of knowledge does this referee have, how sure of themselves are they. And so again, how you carry yourself, how you call those, and do it immediately, loudly, and confidently, you won't have an issue. And when you make those calls, again, you've heard me already do it in practice here. You're saying point, second server, side out. After every rally, that's what you have to identify. What's it going to be? And how do you know that? Again, it's based on where the teams are standing and where your clipboard, right? Where is that clip aimed at on your clipboard? So in this case, it's going to be the team to my right. And I know that if they win the point, if they win the rally, it's a point. If they lose the rally, it's either a second server or it's a side out. So you have that right on the tip of your tongue, ready to speak and identify as quickly as you can. During play, when a volley is hit from close to the no volley zone, you do not follow the flight of the ball. You're not interested in where the ball is going. We have a person that is moving towards the no volley zone. They have volleyed the ball. We have to stay with them. We have to monitor them. We have to make sure that their momentum comes to a complete and utter stop prior to touching the no volley zone line or the no volley zone itself. So that's where we focus on. Now we can do that nicely now. What we're teaching, instead of having the referees just focus, their head and eyes straight over, what we want you to do is to be looking down that net and using your peripheral vision. And again, that 14 feet on either side, you'll be surprised how well you can see it by just looking forward, moving your eyes right and left, and focusing again on that foot movement and the feet that are over there. So you can do that quite nicely. If the ball bounces prior to being hit, the no volley zone is no longer an issue, and you can move your head to the other side and see where the feet of those people are and whether that ball has bounced over there or is again being volleyed, and where and how close they're standing to that no volley zone. Again, watching the no volley zone is a primary responsibility. I won't say it's number one responsibility, but I'll tell you, it's 1 or 1A. It's right up there. Score sheet marking and recording. That's where we want to get to. And we're already, what, an hour and 15 minutes in here. So let's just talk about that for a minute. It's all about leaving tracks for recreating later. So we're going to teach you how, after you've made the marks, how to be able to go back and reassemble what has happened on that court and be able to answer some of the questions. You can't answer them all, but you have a very good opportunity to do that because you have a couple of fail safes in there and a couple of different things we're looking at. You should be able to look back and confirm the play as it happened and recreate how the score developed. Do it right, do it well, and do it every time, methodically. I can't tell you how many times I've moved my clip and turned the scoreboard around, and instead of putting number 1 over the starting server, I inadvertently put a number 2 over it, which means that team has already lost their starting server because I put a 2. And unless I catch it, which I normally do now, but again, if you're not focused in what you're doing, is my point here, you need to be absolutely positive. Every time you manipulate something on that scorecard, you want to be focusing on what you're doing and doing it right, doing it correctly. So when you turn that over, make sure the number 1 on that server clip is going to go over the correct server based on the score for that starting the next rally. So if it's even, it's going to go over the players who is the starting server and has been identified with a circle around their name. That's if it's even. If it's odd, it's not going to be that person. It's going to be the other person. So you put the 1, when that number to the left of that vertical line on the side out is odd, we're going to put it 1 over the non-starting server. And that's how I look at it. I don't identify the non-starting server. I don't know their name. I don't know what they're wearing. I don't care about them because I'm doing everything as if I'm focusing on the starting server. It's either the starting server or it's not the starting server. So that's the way I look at that. And that really helps when it comes to doing matches where we have stacking and both players are standing on the same side of the court. You identify where the band is, and that's all you're tracking based on the score. I think that will probably become a little bit clearer as we go along. So marking points on the score sheet, record every point as it occurs, obviously. Use the appropriate diagonal slash in the score box based on the server. So for a first server, we're going to mark out the number, whether it's 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4, we're going to put the slash from the top right to the bottom left. If it's a first server who scored that point, or that team, that team had a first serve, that's what we're going to mark. If the team had a second server who was serving the ball and made that point, it's going from top left to bottom right, the opposite diagonal. That's why we want to identify that, because we want to be able to go back later and saying what the score was when they came in. The first server has served, they've got a diagonal slash, and then the second server has served because they got the slash going in the opposite direction. Therefore, in that rally, we would know when we have a score that's being done that way, that both servers have in fact served in that rally. So there's no question now whether or not the first server served or not. We can identify, yes, the first server has served, they have lost their serve, and the second server has now served and got a point. And now the next thing is that it's side out. We know that. We're good. So if you look at the score sheet, I think maybe, would you like to take a 5-minute stretch? I can't see everybody. Let me know. Yep, we got, I got one of my 4 has given me a thumbs up. So let's just take a 5-minute stretch and have a drink or whatever, and back in as quick as you can. All right, thanks, Suzanne.
There's a couple of comments in the chat that you might want to address now that we're taking a little bit of a break.
Can I get
Pretty
can I get
simple
you?
question. I've left them up.
Okay. What would be good, Ted? Ted, if you could focus on them for me, that would be good. And just go through and let me know if you can write them down or whatever you have, and then let me know.
Okay, you want me to, do you want me just to,
Well, give it a few minutes. So when we come back, we'll address them when we just finish our break here. Okay.
okay, for sure.
Right, I hope everybody's back in the position. Ted has just given me a couple of questions that were asked in chat, so let me just respond to those quickly. Lead tape on a paddle, is it permitted? Yes, any lead tape can be put around the edge guard of the paddle without any problem. It should not exceed above the thickness of the paddle, however. It should be the same thickness of the paddle and not extend above, if you follow what I'm saying there. And standing accessibility for referees with a problem, sore back, disability, whatever. That was not allowed for the longest time. We're not allowed to bring chairs into the court. Again, there's a safety problem there. But a few referees I know have had chairs in and were allowed. So that comes down to a tournament director's authority and responsibility within the tournament that they're running. And I would hazard to say, based on the courts that are there, whether that will be permitted or not permitted. I've seen a couple of referees doing tournaments lately who have been permitted to use chairs. But again, they're usually in courts which have got lots of room in an area where that does not become a safety issue from those people doing any earnings or the like. Right, does anybody else have any other questions based on what we've covered so far? Would be a good time to open up the mic for a quick review.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, regarding, the online test, do they have to be taken every year in order to keep your referee credentials?
Well, I tell you, to be quite honest, what you should be getting from this presentation is that you should be doing the referee tests more often than that. We've said that you should be doing it every time before you go to any major tournament. You should be taking the tests and just boning up on it. You should be looking at the material. You should be reading the rules. So the answer to that is no, we don't have a maintenance policy that we are applying, and we're pulling credentials based on non-compliance, but we're hoping that people will keep abreast and up on that, and they need to, and they should be taking those tests, I would say, probably 4 or 5 times a year, minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, let's move forward then. And let's look at the score sheet that we have here again. We have Jim Smith and Mary Smith. So from this right away, what can we glean? Well, we know that the match has been going on for a few points and rallies right now. We know that Mary Smith was identified as the starting server for this team. And we know that they chose, or they were given the serve to begin with, and they're serving the first game and the third game if we get there. We know that when Mary Smith started the first rally, they did not score a point. Hence this vertical line that is so important to put down on completion of every rally. Just once on completion of each rally. So on the first serve, when Mary Smith served, they didn't score a point, so we put this line down. The score sheet was then turned around. We moved our clip to the other team, and whatever they scored 2 points or they did not score 2 points, it came back to Mary. And because the score is 0, Mary Smith is serving first. So this the server's clip should be a 1 over Mary Smith. when she served again at that point. Now, it could be that she served and her partner served, and they again did not get any points. We don't know that. We would never be able to identify whether that's how it transpired, or in fact, when Mary Smith was serving, she hit it into the, or they hit it into the net, didn't score a point. But what we do know is that Jim Smith served, and that team scored a point when it was the second server, because I know that because the diagonal is going the opposite way, as if a second server scored. They then had another side out. And we know then that when the other team has finished again their rally over here, scored points or didn't, it's come back now, and because of this side out marking, it's a 1 who started serving this rally. It's a 1 who started serving. Who's going to tell me?
Jim would have started.
That's right. Because the score is 1, it's not Mary Smith because the score isn't even. So it's her partner where the 1 goes over, Jim Smith. And as a matter of fact, what we know is that he's now served twice and their team has won 2 points. And he's still serving because there's no second server or there's no side out marking. And the clip is still there. So that's where we are in the game. And that's how you recreate what has happened. I can go back all the way to the start, know who the starting server was, know who scored the first point, second point, and so forth. Not that we're interested in, for statistical reasons, knowing how many points Mary Smith made in the game or Jim Smith, or how many points were made when they were starting the server. We're not interested in that at all. All we know is that, of course, who the starting server was when the team ultimately made a point. Whoops, let's just go back there. No, it is back there. So we're good. So again, we're at this situation right now where the score is 3 something 1 because Jim Smith is still serving. So that's how you mark it and make the points, and that's how you read it back. So let's go on. So now again, Jim had scored those points, and now the second server, Mary Smith, is serving, continuing on the same rally, and she now, as the second server, has made 2 more points. So the score now is 5 something 2. And there we have Mary Smith still serving, and we'll see what happens next. So what all this is telling you is between when Jim Smith was serving and Mary Smith, we are taking the clip, we pull it off the paper, we rotate it 180 degrees, and on the other side of the clip is a number 2. I always like the numbers up here, by the way. I like to have the numbers up high. The 1 and the 2 should be up here, and I have my diagonals down here, and all the diagonals are on there for is a cheat sheet. It allows you to look here when that person is serving and it's over her name, you know that you're going to put that next score in and identify it with a slash that goes in that direction. That's all it's there for, is to help you identify which way to place the slash. At the side out, after making the vertical slash, okay, so the vertical slash we're talking about is this one here, where it's going straight up and down, nice solid mark, because we want to identify who, if these scores aren't here, that line is there, whether it's a 1 or a 2, and who your starting server is. So important, so very important. You have to understand that, you have to utilize it every time. You can't miss the side out marking. So you rotate the clipboard so the clipboard is towards the new serving team. You reposition the serving clip to the correct server facing you based on, again, the score and whether it's odd or even. And you want to be as efficient as possible in moving this. And of course, you will speed up as you practice doing this. You want to get so that the players are not waiting for you to call the score, that you have already turned your clip, you've got it marked, you already know if they're in the correct position before you call the score. They've got the ball, they're now ready to serve, and you call the score because you know everything's correct and you've already got it marked. That's where you need to get to. That will not happen overnight. You need to have some hours under your belt. It's going to take you a while to be able to do that. But that's what you're working towards, so that you're efficient and you get that done quickly. So again, this is probably out of position. This number 1 vertical line needs to be earlier in the presentation, just identifying that that was a side out at that point. And again, another side out here after all the scores have been happened. So now when we come back in and it's turned around and we have this clip in our hand, we are going to put this clip where? Not where it is. It's going to be 5. So if it was the side out from the other team, we're coming here, it's going to go to Jim Smith. In this case, what it's telling us is that Mary was serving as the second server, and it's now a side out, and we're putting that side out marking in there, and it's now going to be take the clip off, rotate the score sheet and the clipboard 180 degrees, so the other team's names are up top, and based on their score, we're going to put the number 1 over correct the starting server, whether it's odd or even, and whether it goes over Ralph Brown's name or who it is on the other side. Timeout procedures. Now let's just stop there and let's just ask the question, has anybody got any problems in understanding the vertical lines and the slashes and making those marks? Again, so foundational, you have to get that down, completely understand that and how we do that each and every time. Any questions from anybody? That's great. Let's move on. So timeout procedures. Again, these timeout procedures in any break and play are the ideal spot for any assessor or evaluator to be testing you and in your procedures. So these are areas where you have to get down absolutely perfect in sequence and in how you say it. So team calls for a timeout, acknowledge team requesting the timeout. You're going to activate your timing device. You're going to announce the score, and you further announce 1 minute. Move to the center court to avoid interaction with either team or spectators. The other training point that I like to make here is that don't be so quick to, as soon as that has all happened, that you quickly lift up your score sheet. You put your head and eyes into your score sheet. So you're so worried about making your marks. I don't want you to do that. I want you to say, timeout is called by the team. You go, timeout, receivers, 8-1-2, 1 minute. You don't even lift up your score sheet. You can start moving forward, start your timer, go towards the center of the court where the net strap meets the court, stand there, making sure that both teams have left the court without incident. In other words, sometimes timeouts are called because there's been an anger on the court or a bad call or something's happened and they're mad, so they could have a further exchange. You want to witness anything that has happened. And if you immediately lift up your score sheet, put your head and eyes into your score sheet, and you're not watching them, then you're missing something that you should be calling on the court. So please don't make that mistake. Continue watching them. Once they go off into their neutral corners, you then start annotating your score sheet at center court and make those notes. Advise players when there's 15 seconds remaining. And if you're working with line judges, this is the time that you get their attention. And if the players have left the court with a paddle, you want to re-inspect it before you resume play. So you've been watching that closely, that they've left the court and they've taken the paddle with them. You're going to call them over and you're going to retest their paddle and have another look at it, make sure that everything is okay. You're going to assume that the referee position by the end of the timeout, when the players move towards their positions, that you are in your neutral position. Again, you'll also notice that in the old practices where the referees would turn around and say, timeout, players, please put your paddles on the court, put the ball underneath the paddle. There's nothing in the rules that say that the players must do that. Therefore, you have no authority to ask them to do that. So you refrain from asking them to do that. What they do with their paddle, what they do with the ball is up to them. Now, between end changes in those situations, you want to gather the ball up, but at a timeout, they can keep the ball with the server usually, and the server will usually put the ball underneath their paddle so that they have identified themselves. But you don't ask them to do that, is my point. So there needs to be a script for this. So let's carry on. Notify the teams of the remaining timeouts, right? You call time in, Announce the score, start the 10-second count count again after you've announced the score. Failure to serve within the 10 seconds is an obvious fault. The other point that is pretty new is that any players that are, when the time is in, if they have not quite got into position, we're not going to call the score. In the old days, we used to call the score and they would rush into position, or the other team would serve and they wouldn't have it. They're saying now, if they're within a couple of steps, you're going to wait until they get into position, because only you know what the formal timing is. So you're going to wait a few seconds longer and then call the score when all the players are in position. Understand that? So you're going to give a little leeway, a little discretion here to the players. We're not going to be so dogmatic as to call the score when they're running back into position. We'll wait for them for a minute or two, as long as they're moving smartly and they're getting right back into position. Proceed for when players are ready to resume play. You're going to mark the timeout at center court. You're going to watch the players. Yep, we've already said that. Time it so you arrive in your position at the same time that the players arrive in theirs. So once you've said 15 seconds, you've checked your line judges, you've told them that they've got 2 timeouts remaining, they got 1 timeout remaining, and they start taking their positions, you start backing up towards the net post, and you should arrive behind the net post in your position when the players are all in their position. So if you get one team that stops and starts talking at the baseline, stop where you are. You've only made it a half of the way back from the center of the court to the net post. Stop, as long as the time it permits, and then you arrive back there when time is in or they're in position. So just think about that procedure and how you do that. If all players are ready before the time has ended, you can look at them. Players are ready. Time in. Call the score. So your scripts should look like this. Timeout, receiver, 5-1-1, 1 minute. So that's it. So the team calls timeout, and you go timeout, receiver, 5-1-1, 1 minute. See how quick that is? That's much shorter than what we used to say. Timeout, timeout called by the receiving team on my left. Score is 5-1-1, you have 1 minute. So now they've condensed that all the way down to that shorter script. Time in script, 15 seconds. Receivers, you have 1 timeout remaining. Serving team, 2 timeouts available. If you're working with line judges ready. Time in, 5-1-1. Therefore, there's no lost time. It's all nicely done in a brief and concise manner. Timeout rules cannot be used. Timeouts cannot be used to delay the start of the first game of a match. Okay, that's important. You should know that. Can't take a timeout before the referee starts to call the score for starting the match. The ball is dead, the match is dead, nothing's happened until that first score is called. The referee cannot call the score until all 4 players are at the court ready to play. So that's the point we want to make here, is if there's 3 players at the court, 1 person hasn't arrived, and they don't arrive for 10 minutes, what happens?
Game forfeit.
Say again?
They lose the game. It's a game forfeit.
At 10 minutes, they are subject to a game forfeit. Now, I say it in that manner. You're quite right. But you want to check with the tournament director, the head referee, before you assign it, because you don't know whether there's any extenuating circumstances. But if they haven't showed up for 10 minutes and there's 5 minutes leeway after you've been called and they've been called to the court, at 2.5 minutes, you're going to get a second call made for them. At 2.5 minutes, halfway through the time, if they haven't shown up. At 5 minutes, when they should have been there, you're going to get a third and final call to that court. And after 10 minutes, again, they are subject to a game forfeit. Go talk to the tournament director, head referee, and then go back to the court and say, yes, that's a game forfeit. That team has lost the first game. Now, how long do we wait now for a match forfeit?
5 minutes.
5 minutes more, right on. So it's 15 minutes in total for a match forfeit. There's one exception to that rule. Anybody know what it is? A match forfeit can be called after 10 minutes. When?
Game to 15 15.
Who am I talking to there? I'm not seeing you. You're not coming up on me here.
Tony,
Tony? Well done,
Yes.
Tony. Answered correctly each and every time. Exactly. So after 10 minutes, if the game is 1-15, that is not only a game forfeit, it's a match forfeit all at one time. And in matches 1-2, best of 3 to 11 by 2, we have to wait 15 minutes. And then again, they're subject to, and we would want to just check with the tournament director, head referee, that we are in fact going to forfeit them. So right on. Can be taken between games in best of 2 out of 3 format. So in other words, both timeouts can be called for to have a washroom break, for example, and they would then have how long to run to the washroom if they ask for between games 2 and 3. They ask for 2 timeouts. How long do they have before they have to get back on the court?
be a total of 4 minutes to have 2 1-minute timeouts and to have 2 minutes between games.
Excellent, Tony. Yep, exactly. Can request both timeouts at start of the second or the third game. If not required, one remains for later use. In other words, if they come back after 2 minutes and 55 seconds, then they still have a timeout to their good, and you can erase that timeout usage, and it's still available to them. So the timeout can be called after the score has been called, as I said earlier. If it's not been called, the game match hasn't started, and there's no timeouts can be taken. Cannot be called after the ball is served. Right, so we had that situation before in the timing of that. So after the paddle hits the ball, any timeout that is called is a fault, delay in game, right there. Marking timeouts on the score sheet, another, again, assessors and evaluators key area to hone in on. Mark the game, the score sheet in the appropriate timeout box. You separate the team score using the diagonal slash as per the score. So again, if it's a first server, it's that way. If it's a second server, that way. So we'll see what we do in the box. So here's the timeout box. So the score is 5-4 what? Well, it tells you right there. So it's 5-4-1. It's a first server, so it goes from the top right to the bottom left. So the first thing I do in the timeout box is I put in the diagonal that way or that way. And then I write the 5 and the 4, just as you call it. And it doesn't matter which team has asked for the timeout. The score, when you said that what the score was when they asked for a timeout, the score is 5-4-1, 1 minute. You then mark it down, 5 first, 4 second, and the 1 is identified by the slash. Now, if it's the receiving team that it has asked for it, and of course 80% of all timeouts are usually asked by the receiving team, the score sheet's going to be upside down. You do not turn the score sheet around to right side up to mark the score down. In other words, this team, when you go back to here, you see that 5-4? That was when they were the serving team. Now, this is when that was in game number 1, and they took it as the serving team, and that's why it's upside down now that they're the receiving team. Now they asked for 2 timeouts in the second game, and they were both asked for when they were the receiving team. I know that because, of course, the wording here is upside down. And the score, when they asked for it, was 7-5-1, was the first one. When they asked for that, what was their score?
5.
Thank you. Their score is 5. We don't mark their score first. We don't want to confuse issues. The score is 7-5-1. And because they're the receiving team, the serving team score goes first. It's marked down just as we say it, 7-5 with a 1. The next time out they took was at 10-5-2. They're still the receiving team. They've scored no points. The other team has scored 3 more, and they're on their last leg. They're taking their last time out at 10-5-2. Okay, so don't get mixed up and start turning the score sheet right side up. You just mark it down upside down as it appears there. You just jot it down into that timeout box without turning it around. Between games, best of 3 to 11. So we have the second, or between the first and the second, or the second and the third. You announce game and the final score and the names of the winners. So after the first game is over, you announce game 11-6, Smith and Smith. And you then would say, you start your timing device, you have 2 minutes, you collect and hold the game ball, you move to the center of the court and prepare your score sheet for the next match. And remember, you've had your head up watching them get off the court, make sure that there's nothing, no interaction between the two teams. So the script for this one is point, game, 11-7, Smith and Smith, timeout, 2 minutes. That's how it all goes together. That's what you have to learn to say each and every time that there is an end of game situation. Preparing the score sheet for the next game, you want to make sure you draw horizontal lines through all the previous games of the unused scores and the timeout boxes that have not been used. You want to circle or lightly shade the boxes containing the final scores and the points for each team. So let's see what that looks like. So what we're saying is we circle. I like using the circle. I don't shade it. So I circle the final score. So this is 11. And in this case, it is 5. And we circle them. And then we want to take our pencil and I just draw a line through the unused numbers and continue that through the timeout boxes. Can anybody tell me why it's important to do that? Besides Tony. Tony's been reading this book too much.
So that way the scorecards don't get changed at a later date. That way you can verify the scores.
Nice idea, but no.
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 Because you don't get mixed up with the next one. When you start the next game, yeah, so you know that it's finished. You know that game is finished, and then you start the new one.
Is that Suzanne?
Yeah, it is.
That is correct. That's it exactly.
Yes.
And this is
Yeah.
only for your purposes and your purposes only that we're doing this. So that just as Susan is saying, if you don't put those scores, you don't put the line through there, you can be working in game number 2 and going along here. And especially if a team scored either 1 or 0 points here, you can find yourself putting their score from the second game up into the first score line because they were previously unused. Or you put a timeout from the second game into the unscored out timeout box for the first game. And then you're saying that they never used a timeout in game number 2. So you need again to make the correct marks on the score sheet to help you not make mistakes is what it comes down to. And that's why we do this. Now, I've had some score sheets that have been turned in to the referee coordinators and the referee desk, and they're admonishing referees for not putting these lines in. And that's really none of their business. This is something for the referee to do, albeit the head referee could admonish you and say, I would like to see these lines in there because you potentially are creating an error for yourself if you don't do that. So when we get to the third and final game, is it important to score out the unused portions and the timeout boxes? Tony.
Sorry,
Yeah.
what was the question again?
Is it important? Say this team again wins this 11-6,
Yes.
right? And so that we have all the numbers from 12 to 17 that are not used. Should we put a line through there and the unused portions of the timeout boxes? Do we need to?
After they've completed it?
After game 3, do we need to do that?
I do.
Yes. Yes, you have to do it after every game.
No, you don't. The
Well,
only
that's what
reason,
Julie told me.
again, the only reason we're putting those lines in there is so we don't make mistakes from one game to the next. So after the completion of the third game, there's no reason to score out those numbers.
Sorry.
No reason at all. Okay, we only are doing it so we don't inadvertently go from the second game to the first game or from the third game to the second game. So just making that point. There's no reason to do it other than that. So between games, you want to make sure when you're at center court and you're doing your administration, you now are going to take the score sheet. You're going to turn the clipboard around so that the clip is going to be facing the other direction. And then you take the score sheet out of the clipboard and you rotate it 180 degrees. Sorry, before you do that, the one stays stationary and then the other one moves 180 degrees. So it's pointing in the opposite direction because their teams, they're going to switch ends. So they're going to go to the other end of the court. So you have to make sure that when those teams switch, you have that clip facing to the right names of the people who are now going to move to your left and to your right. And that clip is facing them. Everybody understand that? Any questions? Okay, good. You rotate the score sheet accordingly, and as I already said, and then you place the serving clip, number 2, above the starting server for that next game, right? So again, it's going to be your starting server. If they haven't changed their starting server, it's going to, and they do have that ability to identify to you, we are changing our starting server between games 1 and 2 or between games 2 and 3. They may change their starting server. Let's say they didn't. So we know who the starting server is. And all we're going to do is put the clip number 2 above that circle player because the score is 0-0-2. Right? And that's how, and we do that in anticipation of us having our administration done before the players get back into position to resume the match. And we're all up in what we're doing and we know where they're going. Yeah, hang on a minute. I'm going to follow Tony's example and turn on some lights here myself. Hang on a second. Sorry, somebody turned the lights out in Arizona. At 1 minute and 45 seconds, you're going to loudly identify to both teams that there's 15 seconds remaining. You're going to return to start backing up to your referee position, 4 or 5 feet behind the net post. Your game may begin earlier if all players are certainly in agreement, and return the ball to the serving team so that they can, in fact, serve the ball after you call the score. If the third game, remind players of the upcoming end change at 6 points or 8, well, it would be 6 points in best of 3 to 11. And at the end of 2 minutes, you're going to call time in and call the score, even if the players are not in position. With the exception, again, we're going to be a little bit more gracious. And if somebody is moving quickly into position, we're going to allow them to get there. Just a few seconds grace. That's all we're doing. Before, we used to be pretty dogmatic. And as soon as we called time in, 0-0-2. And if they weren't in position, the serving team was quite in their rights to serve that ball to an empty court for an easy point. We're now, again, being a little bit more gracious. If they are moving smartly back into position, getting there quickly, or if there's a reason they're not there, we wait and hold off on that. Again, as soon as you call the score, you're going to start your 10-second count and have that in your head so that you know that there's when there is a time element or a failure and a fault due to a fault count, time count. Scripts, starting of game 2 or again, starting of game 3, you're going to announce game 2, time in 0-0-2. Pretty simple, very basic, and get things moving along quickly. End change procedure at 6 and 8 and 11 points. You call timeout, instruct the teams to switch ends, state the score and announce 1 minute, start 1 minute counter, move to the center court, mark the score sheet and change and that the change has been made. Before removing the service clip, this is very important at end changes. You're going to, before you remove your service clip, you're going to put a number 1 or a number 2 adjacent to the server who that clip is beside, the name of that person. And we'll show you that, so that may be a little bit clearer. Rotate the score sheet and the clipboard again, so that clip now on the clipboard is facing the proper team, now standing to your left or standing to your right. And you're going to replace the server clip over the name based on the 1 or a 2 and based on the score. So let's see what that looks like. Nope. And the end change script, timeout, end change, 6-5-2, 1 minute. All right. So as soon as they get to the 6-5-2, you say point, timeout, end change, 6-5-2, 1 minute. And here's the sheet. So we have Jim Smith is serving. They've reached the 6th point. So we put the 6th point down. That's when we call timeout and change. 1 minute, 6-5-1. So before we remove this clip, we put the 1 there, and we put the fill in the triangle if you wish, and then we turn and rotate this clip 180 degrees, and then we replace the server clip over Jim's name with the number 1 shown there. Right? Clear to everyone?
Al?
Yep.
I've been refereeing a couple of unsanctioned tournaments, and what I've been doing in this last tournament, because I was a little bit better, was writing the score down next to that triangle.
Yeah, when I was taught, we put in the score up here just as we would write it down for a timeout. So if this was a 1, I would put the diagonal slash that way, and I would put the 6 and the 5 there, and that's what I still do. So I again have more information at that point, and I know what the score was. It was 6-5, and it was the second server, and that's what I do. Best practices now are just asking for a 1 there. I don't think that you're going to lose any marks by any evaluator or an assessor if you do it either way. But again, best practices are just asking for a 1 there. That's all you have to do.
Okay.
And change procedure at 45 seconds. You're going to loudly notify both teams. 15 seconds remaining. You assume your referee position after at 1 minute. State time in, call the score, 10-second count, so forth, like you normally do for everything else. At time in, 1 minute is allowed at an end change. Like any official timeout break, conversations between partners are certainly permitted. Hydration is permitted, and coaching is permitted at any official break in play. So any timeouts, any referee timeout, but not just stoppages in play. They're not allowed to be coached. They can get hydration. If you go back into a period of time, you might recall if you were a player, hydration breaks were permitted. They were in the rule book, and the tournament director would come across and say, hydration breaks are now permitted in accordance with clause or rule such and such and such and such. And you would be able to ask for a hydration break. That's no longer allowed, but players are allowed to take hydration at any time during the match that they wish. But I'd like to make the point, it's a sip and go. They should not be interfering with the flow of the game, and they should certainly not be interfering with the flow of the game if they are the receiving team. The serving team has got a far better odds of taking a drink and taking it a little bit longer. And if you think that they should have been in position, you simply call the score, and they have 10 seconds to get into position. So I make this point with my players sometimes when it's hot. You as a receiver can take a drink at any time. I'm not stopping you to take on hydration. But if you're delaying the game, I will call the score. And if you're not in position, you are subject to being served upon. So they know that they should only be taking pauses in play when they're the serving team, if they're concerned that way. Coaching is permitted during, again, any official break in play. So at completion of the match, your script is point, game, match, 11-6, Smith and Smith. You then walk forward to the center court where you're going to complete the administration, and you're going to complete your score sheet. And there's a number of things that we're going to show you have to do, and you're going to get the winning team to initial the scores on the score sheet. Trace. At completion of the match then, so what we're going to do is circle or shade the points for the scored by the team. You're going to write winners by the winning team's names and circle both names. You're going to, with winners' names up, you're going to record the scores of all the games in the order they occurred on the center score line, with the winners' scores first. Mark the game scores accurately and legibly, and have the winning team member confirm that they are the winners. That's their names, and the scores and the initial the scores to verify the end scores. Recheck your work before turning it into the desk. Return it without delay back to the score desk, don't, in other words, get stopped by players who want to ask questions or ask you detail about this. You can say, yes, I'll answer that, but you need to walk with me. You need to get it back, because if you take 3-4 minutes to answer questions, that court's now not in use and not available to the tournament. And most tournaments are being run very efficiently and need that score sheet to be turned in so that the next team can get out there, so that it's not midnight by the time that the referees and the players are finished. Incorrect player or position error may be corrected up until the point in time when that score sheet hits the desk and is turned in to the officiating desk. Right, so that's another point in time. So if a team, you're walking back and you to the desk and you get a tap on your shoulder and say, hey ref, you know, in that last game, that was the wrong server who served that last point. You stop, you look at your score sheet and you go, my gosh, it could have been. You get your 4 players, you go back, you discuss the situation, and you may replay that last point. So again, that's another important time. When can the score sheet not be changed? After it's turned in. When can it be changed up until you turn it in? So here's your completed score sheet. This is what one looks like. That is correct and done in every way. So Mary Smith's name was circled as the starting server for her team. They have won. So you now take your pencil and you circle both of the winning players' names. That's what we're after. Within that circle or just outside of it, we're going to write winners. We're going to then, because that score sheet is in the upright position, we are then going to look at the scores. 11-5, we write 11-5. Then we have 5-11, and then we have 11-7 and 11-7. And so we've written them as they happen. 11 and 11 means they're the winners, 2 games to 1. And so we get them to initial, and Mary Smith has initialed that. You'll notice the horizontal lines going through the first and second games for each team. That's beautiful. It's done neat and tidy, and that should be turned in, and it's correct. But again, you want to verify that in fact it was Mary and Jim Smith that won, and not these other people who we're now going to send home and would not be available if we got it wrong. And believe me, I can't tell you how many times that the tournament desk has been given the wrong information and it's been turned in wrong, and we've had that problem. We had it 2 weeks ago at a tournament, and it caused us about an hour delay. It messed up the whole system. So it happens. Completed score sheet 1 to 15. It's the same thing. 16 to 14 in this case, and their signature. Again, they're written with their names up and their names circled, and winners written within the circle. Ladies and gentlemen, what is that? 2 hours and 10 minutes? I said 2 hours and 30 because I knew it wouldn't quite be 2 hours. So I think that will do it for tonight. So this gives an opportunity to answer any questions that you might have. Any comments? Let's stop sharing here for a minute. I can see everybody. See a few more people anyway. We're down to 31 that stayed with us. I probably lost a couple of Atlantic people.
There was one last question in the chat, Alan, and it was, can you get coaching on a medical timeout?
Yes, it's an official break and play. So during a medical timeout, they can have as much dialogue as they want with their coach, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to handle medical timeouts. They're an interesting little evolution by themselves, up to 15 minutes. And there's a couple of new nuances that have gone into that as well that they've had happen. So the rules have changed slightly on that. Any other questions? So for those that have not,
I have a question.
just before you do,
Yeah.
for those that have not, and you've probably not scored a score sheet before, do you think that you could go out there now and properly put in the diagonals and the vertical lines and know what you're doing based on what you heard?
Yes.
No.
I think I have a fighting chance.
Good. Well, you know, that's good. It's based on you, but I've given you the basics of it. And certainly if you have problems, you know probably where to turn. and you know really what you should be looking for. And so I think you're on the way there at least. Yeah. So Sylvia, go ahead.
Yeah, I've reffed a couple of games, well, a couple of tournaments since I've been down here in Gold Canyon. And one of the, I guess, strategies or tactics that some of the players are using is they're doing a lot of talking to each other between points before they're getting a position. So what do you consider as reasonable, and what do you consider being a delay in play?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's one that I think about all the time. Listen, you know, without them talking, you have two teams that are playing, and the points being scored, and the receivers then change positions and move into their positions. So the one person goes to stand behind the baseline, the other one goes to stand behind the no volley zone line. So how long does it take them normally to do that? And that norm becomes what you're basing your decision on. Now, I always give a leeway of a couple of seconds, but I'll tell you, those people who are clashing paddles, wanting to stop and talk, I call the score. I call the score, and they get to know that they can't do that and delay the game. Now, if they're doing a quick clash of the paddles and getting right into position, no problem. But if they want to stop and do a little conversing, call the score. The problem becomes if a player has their back to you, the receiver has their back to you, or has their paddle or their non-paddle hand up, those are all indications of not ready. And the referee is responsible for not calling the score until they can verify what the problem is. I had a pro player do that to me, and I called the score after a good 5 seconds because I felt, you know, there's no reason for this. It was probably the wrong thing to do in hindsight. What I should have done is turned around and said, are you needing a timeout? Are you calling a timeout? Right? And then, if not, move into position, please, and give that direction, call the score. So again, these are all learning things. We do it all the time. But yeah, absolutely. You'll notice teams moving into position very smartly when they're serving and they're getting points. They now become the receiving team, and all of a sudden they've got a sore ankle or a sore knee or a back, and they're dragging their behinds. And they're doing that on purpose to slow the serving team down from having their momentum without calling a timeout. I called the score. I'm very aware of that. I played squash. I refereed and umpired squash. Squash is a cardiovascular sport where we haven't moved into that with pickleball, but that's a very big part of squash. And so that umpire and that referee are going to call that score when the players should be ready and move into position. So my players get that a lot.
Al, this is Connie. I've got to build on that last question. Say your serving team is waiting, but that team that's dogging it all the time, and I shouldn't say he, it's just because I run across it that way, but it's because they're coaching their partner, but he's holding the ball. He is not throwing the ball over